MK Lords, it's very nice to see you today. I wanted to introduce you as you're the head, the editor of Bitcoin Not Bombs, and also the host of your own show, Crypto Convos, and a big expert in the Bitcoin space. So it's nice to see you this morning.
And thanks for talking with me, Jeff. Good to see you too.
So we last saw each other at Libertopia, right? And
Yes.
you were on a panel, and I really liked the panel, and I intended to interview you there, but then, of course, everything gets out of control. So this is really a kind of a follow-up to that. That panel talked a lot about developments of and the Bitcoin space in 2014 and some expectations for the future. And I guess your impression is that the Bitcoin space is maturing and developing an infrastructure, and that gives rise to opportunities and to problems. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So the panel at Libertopia, it was me, Angela Keaton from antiwar.com, Davi Barker, and Drew Phillips from Bitcoin Not Bombs. And what we were talking about was what different charities and businesses in the space can do to be more transparent and have more credibility going forward. Because 2013 was very much the year of the scam, and so 2013 started on a really high note. We saw the price of Bitcoin, rocket up, to close to $1,200, and then it dropped, after the MT Gox thing. And I think a big part of the drop was MT Gox. I think this was this is still the largest scam in Bitcoin. A lot of new people had just come in. They didn't realize that MTGOX was already having all of these problems that a lot of other Bitcoiners knew about. And so they just kind of trusted them. And then we're still not sure what happened, but millions of coins disappeared. And these people were left, some people lost their life savings. It was devastating, completely devastating. And you keep seeing these kind of scams coming up because it's a new space and it is a currency, so there's very much an incentive for scammers to come in and rip people off, whether they're doing it through phishing scams that you're always going to see, or they're making a more calculated effort through, a new altcoin or through a new organization even. So there have been all of these scams that have kind of been popping up, and I think when we made it to about the middle of the year last year, there was a lot of depression, there was a lot of stress, people were kind of sick of seeing these things happen over and over again. It was like, what can we do to stop it? So the panel that we were talking on was like solutions. What can we do to, be better going forward? What can we do to self-regulate so that we don't need these external regulations coming in? So we talked about things like multi-signature wallets, which are accounts that 3 or more people hold the keys to, and you need a majority of signers to do a transaction. So this kind of brings a little more transparency. You can name the key holders and say, if you need 2 out of 3 signing it, these 3 people are holding the keys, and you can vet them, to make sure that they're trustworthy, and it prevents people from running off with all of the funds, hopefully. I mean, that's the goal of it. You can still have, dealings and stuff. You can still have corruption, but it's more of a safeguard, and it looks more transparent to the outside. There also just needs to be more due diligence. You need to look into these people who are coming up with sometimes often brilliant ideas that sound really good on paper, and they have a really nice looking, scrolling website, and everything looks legit. But when you start looking into their background, maybe you realize they're repeat scam artists, or something is just off. Listen to your gut feeling. If you're reading about something and you're just like, something seems off with this, really look into it before you give your Bitcoin, or if you're into other altcoins, to anyone, because I think that's where most of the coins are being wasted right now, is in these scams that keep coming up and saying we have this utopian vision of this business, and we just need to crowdfund, we just need to get to $1 million or something, and then we'll be able to implement it. If they don't have something already to be implemented, if they don't have source code or a white paper that you can read and analyze, then don't give any of your Bitcoin to them.
Right. That's always strikes me as funny. I should clarify though that early on you said 2013. I think you meant 2014. But it was a wild year,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah, it shocked me because I made this amazing prediction that Bitcoin would reach $1,000 by the end of 2013, and I was exactly right. And then I predicted, further increases to 2014. I was 100% wrong. So it shows you then we can really get it. It's the worst thing that ever happens is to make an accurate prediction, because then it's almost like a guarantee it's going to go wrong afterwards. But during the year, I attended many conferences on Bitcoin, and of course they always have exhibitors, and there are many dozens of these things, hundreds really, and it's really exciting to see all the businesses. But yeah, you're right, it's difficult to tell. I've received so many sales pitches for new software suites and services, and sometimes you can't even follow what they're talking about. There's so much innovation, but and a lot of it legitimate. You mentioned multisig. That was something that I heard about at the beginning of 2014. That seemed crazy and outlandish. Now here we are, beginning of 2015, and it's a common thing.
Right, it's getting more common in the space. More organizations are using it. We have one at Bitcoin Not Bombs, and there are other organizations too that have set it up. And that technology, we thought that it was going to be ready a lot earlier too. So 2014 was supposed to be the year of the multi-sig. You kept hearing people say that, but the technology wasn't really being widely used at all, maybe till about, the middle of the year. So even a little bit after that, when you saw places like BitGo and CoinKite come out with their multi-sig wallets. And I think in a lot of ways, it's still kind of a work in progress as far as getting organizations to jump on the multi-sig bandwagon. I think you kind of have to reach that critical mass of people saying, we're kind of sick of dealing with these organizations who aren't going to be transparent. So there has to be a demand from people using Bitcoin and using these services.
What are some of your favorite vendors that have emerged in 2014 that you use, that you like? Do you want to mention any?
Yeah, what I think is an interesting organization is Gift, which allows you to turn your Bitcoin into gift cards for a variety of places that don't accept Bitcoin directly. So a lot of people are like, oh, we want to get Amazon to take Bitcoin. Well, Amazon doesn't directly take Bitcoin, but you can go through Gift and turn it into a gift card and use it. And they do this with a lot of restaurants and things like that. It's really kind of broadened the scope. But the places that take it directly, I think, are even better because they've shown that they kind of believe in the technology. Places like Overstock.com, and I got to interview Patrick Byrne last year. I'll be interviewing him again next week, and he's a true believer in Bitcoin. He believes in the technology. So there are a lot of businesses coming in wanting to take Bitcoin, but maybe they're cashing out immediately. They're not holding on to Bitcoin. Well, he's wanting to pay, bonuses in Bitcoin, and even, pay some of his employees in Bitcoin. And he's even wanting to start his own crypto securities too, which is really interesting. So yeah, Overstock.com is great. I try to support places that I think are going to hold on to their Bitcoin. I haven't been spending a whole lot because the price has dipped so low, and I think that's been kind of true for a lot of people. We've seen a lot of merchant adoption, but the price has also dipped. So some people are kind of unwilling to spend. But yeah, I like Gift, Overstock.com.
Yeah, I guess the Christmas season, or the holiday season in general, was a little disappointing for in the Bitcoin space, and that's probably because people are just holding on. I remember talking to some people at BitPay, and they said their business just goes wildly up when the price goes up, which is an interesting sort of thing. You'd think that people would want to get rid of their Bitcoin if the price is falling and hold on to it when the price goes up. At least that's sort of what theory would predict, but the psychology works differently than theory. So it turns out people do tend to spend more as the exchange rate, dollar exchange rate, is rising.
Mm-hmm. And when we saw the price increase so rapidly at the beginning of last year, that just made it even more ripe for scammers to come in, and that's where you saw a lot of thefts happening. And that was I actually even got worried when I saw the price going up so much, because that's kind of immediately what I thought was, oh, now even more people are going to be trying to get their hands on it because it's so valuable. But what we're seeing now is a much lower price but stability, which I think is good in its own way. we've kind of seen this price correction down, which I think is good. I think a lot, people are buying now if they have any extra money, they're hoping for it to go back up. But we're seeing a little bit more stability in price. And I think that's much better than the crazy volatility in price. You can make money, you can make more money when it's volatile if you know what you're doing, if you get in at the right time. But it's so unpredictable and it scares other people from wanting to get into Bitcoin. So when they see stabilization, even if it is at a lower price, I still think that's a good thing because it looks more like an actual currency that people would want to use and hold on to.
You make an interesting point. Last year at this time, the dominant complaint about Bitcoin was its price instability, which a complaint I never really accepted because it's just kind of funny. I mean, like cryptocurrency didn't even exist 10 years ago, and now it's like first world problems. I'm sorry, the price isn't the dollar exchange rate isn't exactly 100% stable for you yet. This new the digital age technology, is not perfectly stable. It'll take a while, but now, yeah, you're exactly right. We've seen actual stability, and people complain about that too.
Right, right. You can't please everyone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you expect for 2015 in terms of the infrastructure development within the Bitcoin space and adoption?
Well, I hope to see more of a variety of multi-sig options. I'd really like to see more competition in that space. I think we're also going to be having a bit of a struggle with regulations. I think these New York regulations are looking really nasty. I think there's a strong likelihood that they will pass, but I think you're also going to see self-regulation as a response within the community. I think people are going to be pushed more to be transparent because it's easy to be transparent when you have a blockchain that's showing all of the transactions and you can link up certain addresses and things like that. It makes transparency a lot easier. I mean, it makes other things easier too. I mean, you can still anonymize and keep your activity private if you wanted to, but if you're a charity or a business that's operating in the space, you have to be that much more transparent than other businesses, I think, operating outside of Bitcoin, because I think that's what's going to give the space credibility is when you're going above and beyond in your measures of transparency. So I hope we see more of that. I think we are going to see more scams. Unfortunately, I think there's still a lot of maybe blind optimism. I think in a lot of ways 2014 was a sobering year. People started realizing that they have to be a little more serious, with their due diligence and how they approach things. But there were still a lot of newcomers coming in, and there's still that optimism, which is good. There needs to be optimism, but I still think there's still some scammers that are out and about that haven't really been. Maybe they were called out by some people and, people maybe kind of forgot, or it's been kind of, pushed to the side. I think you're still going to see some of that, but I also think you're going to see more aggressive, more aggressive journalism, more aggressive investigations too, and because people are getting sick of it and they're saying, this is our space, like we want this to thrive, and whenever you have this new and interesting technology, you're going to have scammers flocking to it, so you have to be that much more vigilant to protect users from it. For other, they're your friends, your comrades, so to speak. You have to look out for other people and say, this person over here, it sounds like they might be full of crap. Maybe you don't want to look into that, or start asking that hard questions. Why don't they have a white paper? Why aren't they using multi-sig? These are easy questions that should be, that if you are interested in transparency and openness, that shouldn't be a problem for you to address as a business or charity.
On the subject of regulation, I've wondered throughout the year whether and to what extent the threat of regulation has actually slowed down development of Bitcoin. So people are so concerned about it that there's what we're seeing is what Robert Higgs has called regime uncertainty. Like if people don't know what the rules are, they have a hard time planning for the future. And all year now, for 12 months, we've seen regulators just say, "Oh, we're going to do terrible things to you. We're going to impose know your customer rules. The way you're doing things is awful." We saw, Charlie Shrem him, harassed within an inch of his life, and then people actually languishing in jail, for no reason, and just for perfectly peaceful activities. And it does. I've wondered whether or not this has really scared people, and whether you can do a counterfactual. Like how much more advanced would we be were it not for these constant regulatory threats that are out there.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, and that's a really good point about regime uncertainty. And that's actually an argument that a lot of pro-regulation people are using for why we need more regulation.
Yeah.
They're coming in and saying, "Oh, well, it's uncertain. That's why there's not innovation. If we just get these regulations passed, it'll be crystal clear where Bitcoin is and how you need to deal with it, whether tax-wise or, otherwise." And I don't think that's the strongest argument. I think innovation happens regardless of certainty with things. I think that's an argument that they're trying to push, that the people who are very active in Bitcoin, and especially the people who have a background in crypto anarchy or something like that, they don't care about the regulations. They're going to keep innovating no matter what. People working on things like dark wallet. I think there's going to be innovation no matter what. They can threaten people all day, and so the people who might be more minarchist leaning and more like, well, we want to make sure everything, fits into a nice, tidy regulatory box, they might be uncertain. I don't doubt that the people who are pro-regulation are uncertain and probably more cautious about it, but the people who are into Bitcoin for ideological reasons are going to care, much less about that.
But I do understand. I understand the point. It's been fascinating for me to watch. I mean, here's an industry that's just created out of whole cloth. 5, 6 years ago, just out of nowhere, and we have always those of us who are sort of partisans of the free market have wondered, like, why do regulatory agencies exist? How come they come along? What exactly is the relationship between government and business in history? And now we've been able to see it unfold in real time. And your point about business wanting government regulations is interesting. It doesn't mean they're evil, or that they're statists, or they're monopolistic. The problem is we live in a world in which states essentially don't believe that anything should exist unless it's monitored and regulated and overseen and basically approved. So it seems like these days it seems like an unviable sort of thing to imagine a single sector, especially something dealing with something as important as money, to exist on a pure laissez-faire basis. To some extent, I'm not actually, I disagree with them, obviously, but I'm sympathetic with the point that if regulations did occur, it's a way of conferring legitimacy, in a sense, on the currency, and it's a lot of people's impression that this would then, once you have the rule of law attached to the currency as what they call the rule of law, then it'll speed up development. People stop being afraid and fearing for their lives, and have a clearer path of innovation going forward. At least that's the argument. And I kind of get what it means, but it's also introduces its own form of dangers, because every new regulation is costly, and makes the sector less competitive.
hmm I definitely sympathize with businesses who already have to abide by regulations to begin with. They are looking for that clarity, and especially if you're a money services business, the money laundering regulations that you already have to abide by are extremely strict, and the penalties are very harsh if you break the regulations, if you break these laws. And if you're a business who's wanting to take Bitcoin, you want to be certain that you're not going to be, outside of the law, that you're not going to, become a target, even, especially if you're already going by all, and when anyone starts a business, you have to go through a bunch of paperwork and a bunch of, regulations just to get started. So I'm definitely sympathetic to business owners. I think, in some ways, if you do have, if they just finally push the regulation, I think they're going to pass it anyway. Why keep things uncertain for
That's
so
right.
long?
And the other point that people make is that better that we're regulated, less stupidly than we otherwise would be. So, you've got a lot of people in the Bitcoin space now talking to regulators, negotiating and trying to educate them and that sort of thing. In any case, I guess my impression is that it's a lot more complicated than, good guys who want total free market, and the bad guys who want regulations. It's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. There's a lot at stake here. There are a lot of businesses that want to get into Bitcoin that aren't going to until they have a clearer view of how it will affect their business. And, I have heard things like, the next tax year we'll be seeing a section for Bitcoin maybe. You do still have to pay taxes on Bitcoin. The New York regulations haven't passed, but it is still a property. You are still expected to be paying taxes on it and treating it as property. So yeah, there's already expectations that people have. People want to. There are a lot of people who want to stay within the law on this. There are a lot of people who don't care either. But yeah, it's a lot more complicated than
It
it's
is.
good guys versus bad guys.
And in a
Absolutely.
way, it's kind of tragic in a sense. But what I have not seen in the Bitcoin space, and I may be wrong about this, but I've not really seen prominent voices like advocate for regulations that they didn't think were to some extent inevitable anyway. In other words, I haven't seen really people say, "Look, this is a crazy laissez-faire environment of free markets, and that stuff doesn't work. What we really need is regulators to start getting interested in Bitcoin and come in and take us over." This is what I've not observed. What I've seen is people feeling like it's going to happen anyway, so let's make them intelligent. And I, I think this is a little bit of a naive view, but I. I mean, there are people, who agree with me on everything. I mean, I have no, as far as I'm concerned, if I could push a button and make government go away, I would. But there are people who blame certain players within the Bitcoin space for the existence of growing regulations, and I just think that blame is misplaced. It seems to me that people are just trying to make the best of a bad situation. At least that's my overall impression.
Yeah, I think so. I think the people who were wanting to educate the regulators have the best of intentions. I think that they really are looking for that clarity, and they really believe that if that clarity can happen, that more innovation can take place. So I try not to demonize the intentions of things, but I do realize that, and it depends on the conference you're going to also, where the ratio of pro-regulation to, not so pro-regulation is. Different conferences have different kind of themes too. So the Miami one coming up is more heavy on pro regulation, and they're going to have a workshop for getting you in compliance with some upcoming regulations. And if you're a business owner, that might be of interest to you. I don't find it that interesting, but you are going to see more of this. You are going to see more of these, compliance kind of workshops as already exist in the regular financial services world under the current
I mean,
regulation.
that's most of what financial services conferences consist of. It's just one panel
Hmm.
after another about compliance. So,
Right,
I hate
right.
for that to happen to the Bitcoin space. I agree with you. I find these panels just, I attend them all, but it's just like, oh, your eyes glaze over. It's just so boring. Will you be
Yeah.
at the North American Bitcoin Conference?
I won't be. I did get invited, but I'm not able to make it down there. I did
Oh,
get
so
to go
sorry.
last year, and it was interesting. It was a very large conference, and yeah, there I did get to listen to the panels and kind of get a feel. And it's definitely a more pro regulation conference, and a lot of them are. But yeah, so there's going to be that sector of things, and you can kind of choose. I mean, there's still, a lot of different directions people can go in the space also. And again, it doesn't have to be, picking one side over another. I am cautious when dealing with people who are pro-regulation only because I think there's so many unintended consequences that go with
There
regulation
are. Yeah.
that are often more harmful. And I'm not really I'm not really a believer in regulation. I think if you look at most regulations that have been passed, the unintended consequences are worse than the problem that they were trying to solve. So while I believe they have the best of intentions, I'm not a believer in that method.
Well, if you look at the dollar economy, now here you have a currency that is created by government, managed by government, produced by government, monopolized by government, and run by a series of government agencies under very strict rules that ultimately exist in the physical world. And even here, despite all the regulations, they can't control it. I mean, there's, I don't know how much is unaccounted for, but it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars that nobody can find. So, and that's with a nationalized currency. What's it going to be like within the crypto world? You've made the problems for regulators just a million times more insurmountable.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and that's a really good point with cash. You still are able to, something that you saw a lot with last year was a lot of demonization in the press of, oh, what if Bitcoin is used for what terrorist activity or something like that? Or the biggest complaint is, oh, well, people are using it to buy drugs online, which is this terrible thing. But people use cash for those things every day. I mean, cash is used a lot more in money laundering. For example, all of these things that they want that they want to crack down on Bitcoin for are
Okay.
things that they haven't stopped in the regular economy anyway.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. It's just kind of funny. There's another thing that actually I've noticed in the Bitcoin space too, is that some people who advocate for regulating Bitcoin feel as if by their advocacy they're declaring their innocence. It's like I'm not part of this underworld. I love government. I agree with cracking down on drugs and stuff like that. So it becomes a kind of bragging rights. Like I'm in favor of government regulation. So clearly I'm not running a Silk Road on the side or something.
Oh yeah, I think there is a lot of that. It's like, oh, well, see, we're not doing anything shady. We're gonna just open up everything for you. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear, kind of thing. And again, like I don't like to misjudge the intentions of people. I think they probably do believe. I think they probably are turned off by the darker elements, the more crypto anarchist elements of the currency, and some of the potential for what they see as misuse. But ultimately, they can hold that opinion and they can be pro-regulation, but ultimately those things that they don't like are not going to stop anytime soon. You're not going to stop this deep web activity. It's only going to get greater as the crypto economy expands.
Yeah, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see any point in taking down, and apparently the takedowns of the deep web, sort of narcotics markets, have only sort of further entrenched them in a way.
Hmm.
And I only know this because, well, I mean, I've personally found it difficult to navigate the deep web. I'm just always amazed that people are able to do it, but apparently there's interfaces that are far more sophisticated than Silk Road 1, 2, or 3 ever was, that are out there that are attracting tens of thousands of customers.
Right. The demand for drugs especially is never going to go away. And when you take down one site, you're going to have other sites pop up. And we even saw this more recently with Pirate Bay. They trying to take down different torrenting sites. Yeah, when you try to take them down, more come up in their place. It's this eternal game of whack-a-mole where you're going to constantly have innovation. And it's a good thing in a lot of ways. Now, I don't support everything that happens on the dark web. There's obviously a lot of really dark things, obviously bad things. But as far as drug use, I don't really care that much about it. People are always going to use drugs. I mean, since the beginning of time, people have been using them and demanding them and finding ways to use them anyway, regardless of the laws that are passed. So I think, the greater mindset of backing away from this war on drugs and moving more towards a decriminalized mindset about it would be just way more beneficial as a whole, not only for deep web stuff and, the stuff that's already going to happen, but just, for people in general, just, it can help reform the prison systems, and it can help, keeping people out of jail, keeping people who are doing victimless crimes, out of jail, and, not burdening either taxpayers or just ruining lives, really. I mean, there's really the cost of human lives is the most important thing to me in this kind of war on drugs. So if you can kind of have that mindset change, I think it will also follow that these dark web activities or these deep web activities they can't really be demonized as easily anymore. But I think you're still going to see a lot of that because we're not quite there. It's very much a cultural shift that has to happen, and I don't think it necessarily happens through politicking.
I'm looking forward to 2015 and chronicling these developments and watching your show, Crypto Convos,
Yes.
and I'll keep posting them on Liberty.me. And I hope to see you at an event really soon. I always appreciate your intelligence and your observations. I look forward to talking to you throughout the year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for talking with me, Jeff. It's
All
always
the
a
best.
pleasure.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.